What do you need? Oh, stop it. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order as soon as Connie sits back up here with me. No pressure, Connie.
And have to say, as I was
I'm
walking
going to open
in,
the mic for public
I
comment.
went to grab my
I'm
name
going to
tag and it
request
wasn't
that there be
there,
no
and it
public
took me a
comment
moment to
on
remember
any
why.
issues for which a
But
prior public hearing has been
great to
held
be
before
here
the
and
board
be
of
able
directors. Is
to
there anyone
address
here,
MVIC.
to speak during public comment?
I wanted to
I see-
speak to the
I see
discussion that
someone
you're
who
having
looks a little
around
very well.
tip criteria and the question of how much emphasis to give to MetroVision, both MetroVision points for the particular project and the MetroVision related points for the sponsor. And wanted to encourage MVIC and the board to continue to have a significant emphasis on those MetroVision points in the tip evaluation process. I think that the staff recommendation is actually a very reasonable approach on this. I just wanted to give sort of a quick reminder of some of the history. And if you go back to 1999 and 2000, when there was a citizen ballot initiative around growth, and when the legislature was looking at multiple potential pieces of legislation to try to address the sort of growth and development impacts, and many of which would have had a real impact in terms of local control and the ability of us collectively as local officials to make decisions. And one of the things that came out of that was the member jurisdictions of DRCOG saying, we really need to show leadership in this arena. And that's when the concept of the Mile High Compact was created, was basically as a way of showing that local governments could get ahead of these issues. And that's when we began to talk about really trying to have a connection between the principles that we had adopted in MetroVision and how we spent our money. And over the next couple of tip cycles, each time I think we adopted a slightly better approach to making sure that the MetroVision principles were really reflected in the allocation of tip funds. And I think that's very important to sort of show that that the organization, that collectively the local governments are allocating transportation funds in a way that supports the regionally agreed upon principles. I think those principles were adopted in a way that they're pretty flexible. There's a lot of ability to think through at a local level how those principles apply to our different communities. And I think if you look at the results of the TIP process over the last decade, there's a lot of different communities that have gotten funding for a lot of different types of projects. But fundamentally, I do think that we have directed dollars in a way that advance those regional goals and would really encourage the board. There may be some modifications that make sense. I think that the relatively minor modifications proposed by staff make sense, but I think that the fundamental policy direction is one that I would encourage you to continue with. Thanks very much.
And thanks for taking the time, Will, to come down and talk to us about that.
You're very welcome.
Okay, next on the agenda is I guess we have the summary of our January 8th and 15 minutes, and I know we don't approve those, but does anybody have any comments or anything on that they?
I just had a comment that was attributed to me that said that I think I said that all suburbs were losing bus service. I think it was more like historically those that, as the light rail stations had opened, some bus service was lost, not all. It kind of comes off as you get a light rail and you lose everything. So I sent my wording to Connie, but I told her I'd mention it as well.
Okay, is there anything else? All right. Next on our agenda, we're going to move to the informational items, and we have a presentation by Ashley Summers on the Regional Equity Atlas. So are you ready? Thanks.
Yes. Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Summers. I'm the GIS manager here at DRCOG, and in the next 10 minutes or less, I'm going to show you about a new online mapping application that we've created in partnership with Mile High Connects called the Denver Regional Equity Atlas. That might sound familiar to you. Version 1 of this atlas was created by Mile High Connects in 2011. It was a series of static maps, so it's PDFs, at a regional scale, and it shows the interaction of affordable housing data, education, employment, demographics, health, all in relation to transit. It's, as I said, at a regional scale, so you can't really zoom in, and it's still available on the Mile High Connect's website if you want to reference it at that link there. But almost immediately after you start looking at these maps, what you want to see is what's happening in my neighborhood. Now that I see this regional information, what does it look like at my area of interest? So why did we do a version 2.0? We met with Mile High Connects and with focus groups made up of people like yourself, and we found that users wanted to interact with the data at a more local level, even down to the tract. We learned that they wanted to create their own maps by taking the data that's shown in the original atlas and maybe combining them in different ways. Because in the original atlas, you're looking at those topic areas like housing, employment, education, and health all separately. And there is some desire to take all of the different topic areas and mash those up together and look at them and do some analysis across those topic areas. We also learned that people wanted to be able to share this data, share the maps that they create, save, print, and do things like that. So that was our objective. It really makes a lot more sense if I show you the difference between version 1 and 2, so I'll just do that quickly. This is an example of one of the maps from version 1. You can see it shows the distribution of Denver residents who are 55 and older. It's the Denver metro area, and it's regional, and so it's a static PDF. If we want to see this same thing in the new Regional Equity Atlas, which is online, we can go to the map, pull this map up, and now we see it in a similar way as it was in version 1 because we wanted to make the transition between version 1 and version 2 seamless for people who are familiar with version 1. But now you have significant functionality that you can add. You can zoom in to an area of interest. You can add other layers, so you can see over here on the left-hand side we have all of our demographics layers to choose from. We have education layers. You can add layers onto this map, and you can continue to modify these things to see maybe what makes sense to you, adding layers on top of what's already made here. One of the most significant additions in functionality that we have is that we added charts and statistics. So where you couldn't previously get really detailed feedback on things like average household size, jobs, method of commuting, you can get all of those now through the application. So if we open the charts and statistics panel, then the first thing we get are regional summaries where we can see race and ethnicity, household income, age, workers by industry, and then summary statistics over here as well, population, average household size, etc. If we want to see something drilled down further than at the regional level, we can select tracks, and you can watch those charts dynamically adjust to show you statistics just for what you've selected. Would anyone like to volunteer their community so we can zoom in? If so, I'd need an address. 95 what?
9500
East what? Civic Center. Thank you. Is that it? Did it not go where it was supposed to go?
Well, Val, this explains a lot.
Well, that is the problem with live demos.
No.
Yeah, I can try that. Where's it supposed to go? Okay, so we did go to the right spot.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
good.
that's right.
Woo! I was worried for a minute, but it worked. It worked like it's supposed to work. Okay. So now, watch the charts real quick. You can see the charts right now are showing regional statistics, and now we're just going to select the area around this address, and you can see them all change. And now if we wanted to maybe zoom out and add in some areas around here, now we're getting an aggregate of these 4 tracks.
That's great.
So once you've done some analysis here, you've added layers to your map, you've run some statistics, now you can share that. You can embed it in your own website or in a blog. You can share it through social media. You can email these links, and people can come back to it. Yes?
Okay, those regions, I'm just asking Rocky, what are those comprising? Are those census data regions, or are they?
These are census tracts. You can also do this analysis
I
by
just want to
county.
make a footnote
Yeah.
that that was really Todd's question.
Well, Todd was probably waiting to be called on by the chair, as opposed to, not that I'm keeping track.
So,
Ashley, please continue. Are there any other questions?
yeah. Other than that, besides sharing, you can also print, and we've designed the print feature to allow you to name the map appropriately if you're doing some sort of analysis. And you can put notes in there. And if you go to print, it will create a document that is suitable to show with someone. It'll have a legend, it'll have your notes, it'll have our disclaimer, it will have your charts. So it's presentation ready as soon as you're done. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Ashley, this is really, really cool. Just thought I should say the obvious.
Don.
Thank you. How old is the data that's used in this mapping?
Most of it, the vast majority of it comes from Piton through their Colorado data engine, and they update that annually. And so our continued plan is to pull that in at the beginning of every year, so it'll be new. Although a lot of the data is from the census, so we're on their time frame as well. So some of it is from the DC NIL census, and some of it is ACS data, which comes out it's a moving window every year. So it's mixed. You can, if you look at if you're really interested in certain data sets, you can roll over them, and this tooltip that pops up will show you where it's from or what it's showing. And we also have help documentation that will give you sources and links to all the data that's available online.
So Ashley, have you communicated, or has DRCOG staff communicated that information about this tool to our communities, to our staffs in each of our respected, how are you getting this? This is phenomenal, and I think it could be used very well by a lot of our communities and certainly our staffs. So how are they learning about this?
We are taking this show on the road throughout February and March, and this is really one of our first demos. We did one for MVPAC earlier, but the site is just starting to be advertised. We're doing our official launch on Thursday, and we'll signify that by sending out e-blasts to a lot of our partners and contacts. And then after that, we'll just be going around to different meetings and giving demos like this one. If there's a desire for us to do any demos anywhere, I think you can just contact us and we'll try to set something up.
It's very impressive. Does anybody else have any other comments, questions? Jack.
The URL is, denverregionalequityatlas.org, and it's on your handout.
It's right. You're talking about on the duct.
We do, but I'm not sure where it is yet. Cam was supposed to do that. I haven't checked on it yet. There will be a web link from our site. Our site's about to be in transition, so I'm not quite sure where it is on the old site. I know where it's going to be on the new site.
Jennifer.
I just wanted to congratulate Ashley and the entire GIS team. They took a very good document and truly made it come alive and very useful, very accessible. I was actually blown away when I saw this because it's gone from, like I said, a very nice hard copy to something that is going to be very useful to all of you. And I really like, like the print feature too. I think that gives you the opportunity to share with your councils and commissions and help get this information out there and help people know that it's available. But seeing the work that went into this and the high quality product that's a result of this says a lot about who your staff is here at DRCOG. So again, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Looks like we are moving on now to our action items, and is it Doug? It's going to be talking to us about our TIP criteria.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Hope everybody's staying warm. You know, I'm from Canada originally, and people ask me all the time, you know, why I decided to not go back home. This. From November through April, this. No, but we know here next week is going to be that much nicer, so which is great news. All righty. You know, just a quick summary of last time when we met. You know, we voted on a couple of things. We're talking about MetroVision again today, as we have over the last few meetings. I think the discussion has certainly been robust and good. We did at the last meeting, we removed the DIA criterion. We also decided to retain the mile-high compact criterion. And we have in your packet today, there was a request to include a table, and that's attached to your packet. And it's basically, it's the selected projects that we gave you last month, but we added 3 new fields. And the fields were the final score, urban centers, projects that were selected that were within urban centers, and projects that were selected that were in strategic corridors. So that's just for your information. I would like to point out, though, a correction. A Denver project about halfway down the page, the Peoria Smith project, it has a final score of 51. That should be 59. So staff staff pointed that out to us, and we want to make sure we made sure that you guys were aware. Alrighty, and the last thing we did at the last meeting was we've had a pretty large discussion about urban centers, and I'm sure that will continue again today. And we know that you guys, just from our discussions, you truly do value urban centers, and I think there's general consensus that these centers have a potential to make our region more livable and vibrant. And so what we did, I'm almost afraid to tell you this, we created another scenario for urban centers that we believe that it's more simple, it's more streamlined, that we wanted to share with you, and that's at your desk. It is you have 2 copies of it, actually. You have 2 of the criteria appendix F. You'll see one that's a marked up version, and the other one is a cleaned up version. That is for your sanity. I don't want you to have to look at the marked up version a lot, because there are a lot of changes. So what I propose to do right now is just to run through just the urban center portion of this, just to give you some concept of what we were thinking and get your reaction to it. So let me pull it up here on the screen too. This might help. Okay. All right. I got the marked up version that I'm going to go through. So what we did, there's 2 categories for the urban center. There's one, the top one, which specifically talks about the project location. And you remember last time we also included rural town centers in there, and that has not changed. And then the second box talks about the characteristics of that urban center, of that project, whether it being in the urban center itself. So what we did, last time we had this, and there was quite a bit of discussion about this, directly supports. The project would directly support, and defining what exactly that is. So what we decided to do is actually define it, and we're suggesting that the project be located within a quarter mile of an urban center to be eligible for these points. Now let me point out the points. What we're referring to, you remember in the past the points were scalable, that you got up to 6 points in box 1 and up to 4 points in box 2. What we're suggesting is that if a project is within or in close proximity, within a quarter mile of an urban center, that it would be given a set point. It would just be a number of points, which is yet to be determined. It would not be scalable. So what we did, we deleted the mention of these headways and everything that talked about, that gave the scalable, that talked about how, the scaling of the points. We removed those, and we created one out of these 4, and we moved that to the box below in box 2, and this is right here. This one right here. Whoops, that one right here, and so we tried to just create one more generic one that would actually refer to characteristics of what that urban center might look like. So it would refer to, all right, let me just talk about box 1. I think we're done with box 1. So basically it's real simple. Is the project in an urban center or is it not? And if it is, it gets so many points. And then in box 2, where we have the characteristics of that urban center project, there's 5 bullets. And let me go to, there's 5 bullets right here. The 4 that were there previous, plus the new one that we added with the removal of the headways up top. And what we're proposing, that if the project meets at least 3 of those 5 criteria, then it would receive X number of points. If it does not, then it would not receive any points. Pretty clean.
Rocky. I think we should take questions as we go along. Okay, I'll let you go then,
Turn
Jack.
on my
I'll
mic.
get you.
Hello, Mike. Okay. So help me a little bit. I think I'm seeing the first 2 bullets as being complementary, and I think they're getting at some of the conversation we've had. I think some of what Kathy introduced the last couple of meetings, that either you have transit service or you're planning in a manner that would accommodate it, but it's not your fault that RTD hasn't put that into play. Is that a correct read?
Correct.
Of how those, okay, so excellent. Then the last bullet confuses me a little bit. I mean, why don't we just bring it up to the first thing? The project is either in an adopted center, stationary plan, or within a quarter mile. I don't know. It seemed like there's a little bit of, if you're within a quarter mile, okay, I mean, or why is it if you're in the station area that it resides down there? Under characteristics, so.
Yeah, just so we're clear here, that urban center, it's the urban center plan. So
in the plan. Okay,
yes.
so thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
okay, I get it.
Okay, Jack, did you have a comment? Okay.
No, he took my question.
See, that's
Yeah,
what happens if you don't raise your hand.
That's because you stole Todd's, right? Yeah.
Val,
Yes. What on the printed version up in here? Could you tell me why you scratched off the rapid transit stations? Why did you cross those out?
Yeah,
we had a large discussion on that, and we included. So I don't know why you recommend to scratch them off.
yes, that's actually a very good question. We did talk about that internally, and we believe we addressed that later on in the strategic corridors. You remember in the past, it was staff's recommendation to remove strategic corridors. We do believe, though, with the removal of the rapid transit station description in this box 1 of urban centers, that we can accommodate that now in the strategic corridor section, because all rapid transit stations are within strategic corridors. So we think it gets back to that double dipping
double counting.
idea, that we believe that now it's accommodated quite well in the strategic corridors. So we're now recommending to leave in strategic corridors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, are there any other comments regarding these first two boxes? I'm afraid to even ask, but it sounds like we've got some consensus here, so that's tremendous.
Jack, might just say, Rocky,
Yeah.
does that resolve? I put in, urban center master plan.
Yeah, so that was, I just was seeing in and
Okay,
adopted,
good.
so the plan is key, I get that.
Great, thank you.
Chris. Chris needs a mic. Well, and depending on what he says, we'll decide whether it gets turned on.
Just a small clarifying question, I swear.
Maybe you need some water.
That last bullet, so proposed project is identified in an adopted urban center or station area master plan. I had the same question that Rocky had, but he got it answered. But by identified means the project itself is identified in the plan as necessary to carry out the plan. It's not simply located within the plan area. Am I understanding that right?
Correct.
Chris, are you an attorney? Because it depends on your definition of is.
Well, if the
I
chair
understand what you're
would,
saying. I'm
I would be
I'm sorry.
willing to
Yeah, exactly.
do the
Is Doug in the room? I'm
Tisdale
sorry.
dance over the language.
So is the language as written acceptable, Chris? Okay, great.
That is the correct interpretation, though.
Okay, I think it would be helpful to staff if we voted on accepting these, Jack.
I would make a motion to accept the first two boxes and the rest staff recommendation.
Second.
All, was it Todd? Yep. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay, wonderful.
Great. It's great. I'm thrilled. Gee whiz. Okay, so
Don't
we'll
jinx it.
we'll just move right along then.
That's right.
The next one is urban growth boundary, and we did have some discussion about that last time. There certainly was a discussion about whether, if the project is not all in, whether it should get any points or not. And based on the previous criteria, oops, let me pull up what the, based on the previous criteria, what was used, in the last tip, it was this 40%, 90%, that got points accordingly. And what staff had recommended for you all last month was that if the project is partially in, then it should receive 1 point. If it's all in, it should receive 2 points, or something like that.
3
points. I'm sorry. And it is kind of complicated, and we did try to talk through that last time, and we do have an example that kind of shows exactly what it is we're talking about. And you can see here, this was an operational project at Federal and 120th, and you can see the dark that you see. This is that everything that's dark is inside the UGB. Oh, I'm sorry, it's outside the UGB. The light area is within. And you can see the types of scenarios that we're dealing with here. Sometimes it's not cut and dry. Although most of the projects that we do get are 90% plus in that accommodate the last that was in the last criteria. So this is kind of the stuff we're dealing with. Yes, sir.
Jack.
The question I have, and this is a perfect example too also, but one of the problems we have when you say is contained within the established UGBA community, and it's 100%. It's entirely contained. Well, sometimes we had an example. I try and remember the example. It was just at the last tip cycle, where we ran into a situation where the project was within that community's UGB, but because there was literally a reservoir that split it, and the reservoir was not in the UGB because you don't calculate open space and reservoirs as part of your UGB. Now all of a sudden you're not qualified. You're down to the 1 point scenario. How do we address unbuildable or designated non-buildable areas in this UGB this point calculation here when you're actually getting penalized because of a non-growth area that you're not going to grow in, period?
Yeah. I mean,
Jennifer.
I think that's part of the that's part of the conundrum, is coming up with something that's simplified and easy to understand, where there is no disagreement between jurisdiction staff and DRCOG staff, which is kind of why which is exactly why actually on the issue with urban centers, if it's in a quarter of a mile of an urban center boundary, okay, it qualifies. That's something we can all wrap our heads around, a quarter of a mile within the boundary. We got that, as opposed to the old language, which was directly supports. What does that mean? So, you know, this is a struggle, and this is why we're here on this item. I mean, this is why we have 3 and 1, because we haven't found a good way to define how the project is situated next to or within the urban growth boundary. If it's there in its entirety, cut and dry, we all understand that, and there's no question. A reservoir, I think we would all agree, meets the intent of being within the urban center. But then there are also these places where, as we discussed at the last meeting, where you have Swiss cheese because of open space or whatever. They may be cutting through a lot of that, and it could be a situation where the majority of it is actually outside the urban growth boundary. So what do you do with that? So we've this so far, and I'm not saying by any means that this is the best, but this so far is the best way we've come up with to describe those situations where, yeah, it touches the urban center, but you know, more of it than not isn't within the urban center, and so therefore you get fewer points. You know, I guess one way to deal with it is just to say, you know, we don't care if it is going through the urban center or if it's in that quarter mile. Okay, it's in the points and we're done.
Well,
go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, man, I guess the question would be, to me, the more fair way to maybe to approach it is to create, it's almost like no man's land or a neutral territory. It meets the intent of the UGB and the intent of the growth aspects, because it's not going to be built on. I mean, you're not building on Chatfield Reservoir, quite frankly. I mean, I like houseboats, but anyway. But the point being that now I've got a disconnect factor, okay? And when you look at that Swiss cheese, look what we've got. And I would say if you go in and you pinpoint each one of those, I think what you're going to find are little lakes, you're going to find open space, conservation easements, parks. And we find ourselves in this situation of how do we just say those don't count, so we're going to paint it a different color, and if that's in this, you still get your 3 points. That's my only point.
Can I just ask a question? Is there another scenario other than a reservoir where this would come into play? Because if it's just reservoirs, then that's pretty easy to write.
Right.
Rocky Mountain Arsenal.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, so reservoirs, national parks, state parks.
Golf courses.
Isn't that
state land board property?
I mean, can we list them or not, I guess is my question.
Oh, that's a good question.
And if we can list them, let's just list them. Go ahead, Rocky.
So I hesitate to bring this up because, again, I like Jennifer's notion of keep it simple. But, I mean, if we're really going to dive down into those sorts of situations, I think, you know, is there an aspect of this where we start talking about the character of the project? So, you know, I agree with Jack, you know, if it's going from urban to urban and goes outside the UGA, right. I mean, you know, there ought to be a scenario for that. But do we want some qualification on it that the segment that is outside the UGA is like, has some access limitation on it, you know, it's not going to contribute to, you know, making that area become urban if it's an intentionally not urban. So, and again, I may need to defer to staff. I don't know if that sort of distinction resides in like characteristics of projects described in MetroVision. You know, and I think we've talked a little bit before in a few of the other sessions. You know, again, I think we want projects that are urban in character in the urban area, and we want to be supporting projects that support rural character outside the UGA. So I don't know if we have that lens to use in this process.
Okay, I've got Don, then Phil, then Elise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We also have a situation, if you want to add it in, I'm gonna pick on Denver, where we have Denver Mountain Parks in our community. When you factor in Red Rocks and others, so we have State Land Board, Denver Mountain Parks, and others. The list, though, I think is going to get really long when you start adding all the exceptions, and I just want to really be careful of that list.
Okay, Phil.
I was going to ask at the beginning of a simple question, I think. This doesn't talk about urban centers. It talks about the urban growth boundaries in the urban growth area. What is the outside boundary for the region for that? And might we want to just consider the outside boundary as the limit that we might use?
I'm going to have Jennifer respond to that before Elise.
Were it only so simple. Because it's not. We have two ways of allowing communities to track urban growth boundary / area. Urban growth boundary is truly a line drawn around a geographic area. Urban growth area is an accounting for the number of miles of urbanized area community is using. That's not necessarily mapped. So it's not as easy as just drawing, a line and saying, okay, this is the urban growth boundary, because the board in the past hasn't required communities to do that. So again, it's a challenge. We can't just draw a line and say this is where it is.
Elise.
I guess I would want to note that we are in the cusp of the rub when we're trying to simplify, but when we do, then there's nuances that are lost. There's some inequities that are created, and I think we're going to have to decide what's more important, simplicity or detailed fairness as we're perceiving it. And I want us to note that, because Jack is the person that's trying to make it more complicated, and he's Mr. Simplify. But I would also note, for the record, that I think the point about this, the UGB is to promote a compact development form and not sprawl. And so I think I agree with Mr. Rozier that we are on a bit of a slippery slope if we add in every exception, particularly if those exceptions lie on the outside of that compact form, because whether intentionally or not, they can end up causing that. And I note that, while I also agree that it's probably not fair to, be penalized because there's a reservoir. So I'm not exactly sure what the solution is.
I've got Jack, and then Kathy, and then Val.
And you're absolutely right, Elise. I agree with you 100%. Thank you very much. And for chastising me and embarrassing me in public, that's really unfair. But the real key, but the reason I bring it up, because I remember the example, and I'm trying to remember exactly where it was, but it was a bridge project. We had connecting two UGB areas, and we had a non-UGB area in between, and it was partial UGB now. But you had to connect the two. That's what I was talking about. So is there a way, and I'm not saying we have to, but the point is there a way somehow that we can address those kind of situations? I just hate to see a community, for doing the right thing, get penalized. That's all.
I think Jennifer wanted to respond, and then Kathy, and then Val.
I don't think that we have a good solution for you today, so what I would suggest is we take this one off the table for today, much to Doug's chagrin, and maybe Jackie's too, but I'd like the opportunity to talk this over with staff, talk to some of your technical staff about how we might better address this and bring something back to you at the next meeting.
Okay, Kathy, do you...
It's not going to be that specific, so it may actually help. the fact that we go from 3 to 1 is probably a huge gap. So perhaps there is a 2 that is a majority, which is what you used earlier, and then a partially. So perhaps it's 3-2-1. So if you're not, you know, majority is and maybe 3/4 of it is, and it's that one piece, and you didn't drop quite as far down. You didn't go from 3 to 1. You went to 2. So just a thought.
Val.
Yes, I guess I was looking at it from the standpoint of UGB, of a clearer definition of what UGB is, and if you use such words as a developable area, and that means that everything that's not developable gets excluded, so it doesn't get counted.
Yeah.
And so if you say everything that's developable in a UGB area, then it doesn't. Then if there's a dam in the middle of it, that's not developable, so you don't count that. So you immediately put the boundaries off and get those exclusions out.
So I think we've had a very good discussion on this, and I think we've given staff a lot to consider. And I would agree with Jennifer's suggestion to have them kind of incorporate all of these comments into maybe a next round. Is there consensus from the group to do this, or do you feel you want to make a decision on this right now?
Let staff take another crack.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks. All right. We are going to move on.
Great. Thank you very much. The next is strategic corridors. And we've already talked about this here, and what, staff has really changed their recommendation on what we should do with this based on the changes we've made to the urban centers criterion. So I really don't have any additional information to share with this. I think, there seems to be consensus, at least at previous meetings, that you all like this criterion. The language that's in there now, and I should probably show you that. The language that's in there now is the original language. That was the language that was used for the current TIP.
Is there any discussion on this from the group? Val.
Yeah, I guess I'm going back to because in my area we were looking forward to the rapid transit stations as a qualifying for those items, and you removed them from there and put them down up in here. So I guess without knowing what the loss of points is going to be, whether the rapid transit station is in the first criteria or this last one up in here, I'm not sure where we're at. So can you explain that to me?
And if I could take a stab at it, I think we'll be able to, since points haven't been assigned, Val, I think that's something that we will be discussing in the future. I think your point's very, very well made that, yeah, it's hard to see, but if it's the same number of points, whether it's in the first box or the fifth box, you don't care.
Then I'm okay with it.
Right, exactly. So I think that's something we all need to keep in mind as we move forward with this. Okay. But is there anything else staff would like to say?
No, that's very good. I think that's right.
Okay. Oh, yes, Rocky.
Just a question, and this just may just be to clarify for me. So, why is the only segment of 285 the one far to the southwest, and it doesn't include all of 285 to Santa Fe or I-25?
I'm going to defer. Steve, do you have any idea?
Doug doesn't know what 285 is.
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to out you right now, Doug.
285 Hamden Avenue.
It's not Oklahoma anymore, is it?
Oh, sorry, Doug, yeah.
I do know where it is.
Yeah, and I guess there is maybe a thought behind my question, too, because I think I recall that, part of that is actually shown as a future transit corridor for RTD. Maybe I'm mistaken.
I'll have to get back with you on that.
Yeah.
I honestly do not recall how that decision was made for that, and there's several other, remember this was done, 10 years ago, but we could revisit some of those key locations because there's a couple of them on there, and I know which one the hand raiser is going to bring up in about 5 seconds, which I will let.
You expected that, right, Steve?
Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When you look at 285, you look at 285 going all the way, as Rocky mentioned, but also 470, and it stops right there.
Oh, that's
and you go up through and looking at Golden. There's some strategic corridors in there. I'm just assuming, as an engineer geek that I am, a layer was shut off. That's what we always used to say. Oh, that layer was turned off and it didn't print. So just, I think, I like my map better. With that, I printed it will print it out like that means, redo. Yeah, there.
Well, and it is true. I mean, as Steve suggested, I mean, this map really hasn't been revisited for quite some time, for 10 years or so. And I think the intent is really to have, if we could have a map that has like, all freeways and all major arterials on there, and we know what they are. They're in our long-range transportation plan, and they include all the corridors that are currently on here. Oh yeah, they're the black lines that are underneath the pinkish and bluish lines. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, okay.
Oops, let me go the other way. So something like that might, I think that would accommodate everything you're saying. 285 would be in there then.
470.
Yeah, Colorado would be in there. That's not currently. Yep.
So the map needs work. Elise.
Well, I think the past conversations that we've had about this are noting that it makes sense to have the concept of strategic corridors in here so that we're guiding, projects that will help support jobs and housing along transportation corridors, and that makes sense. I don't feel like we have spent enough time with this particular map to know if it's still relevant for these to be considered strategic in this iteration. So I guess I would like to hang on to the concept of strategic corridors, but I'm not ready to say that this is the map from way back. And I just wanted to clarify that. And I'm not sure that we can create that strategic corridor on the fly, mapped on the fly tonight.
Correct. It's something we would want staff to come back. Jennifer, do you have a comment there, or Doug?
Yeah.
Okay. Eva, and then Don.
I just had a real quick question. I was wondering where affordable housing is in this system. Where is it addressed at? Is it? Well, I mean, in the scoring,
In the scoring itself, you mean?
Yeah, I mean.
Well.
Affordable housing, rental units, affordable to households units.
It's actually a good.
Where are we?
What? Eva, are you looking at a certain page?
No, I'm not. I'm just wondering, all in all, are we addressing
Right.
affordable housing? Are we giving scoring for our affordable housing?
Well, I think
where does it give extra points for affordable housing?
The only reference that I believe that's in there currently is actually in the urban center section in box 2. One of the bullets in box 2. Am I on the right one? Oh, there it is. Talks about develop mixed income housing.
Mixed income housing could say something else if it doesn't have affordable housing in it.
No, I understand.
I mean, these urban centers, as soon as they go in, the cost of housing goes up. And mixed income could be, anyone that makes 6 figures and above.
I think that's a good point. This references definition below for mixed income. I don't see what that definition is. Could somebody flag it to see if it actually says anything useful about affordable housing?
Ooh, I might.
Well, it has a definition of affordable.
Well, it says commitment to preserve. The community has inventoried the number of existing affordable housing units located within the urban center and has committed to preserving or replacing these units one for one.
But there's no definition for mixed income
Well,
housing.
commitment to preserve mixed income housing equals, I
What
guess
if it's a new urban center and there is no housing? Or housing was taken out and they're just putting in mixed income housing? I mean, there's no definition for mixed income housing.
For new.
Doesn't say anything at all about affordable housing under mixed income housing.
Show me. It says affordable housing equals rental units affordable to houses earning 0 to 60% of the area, but
Nothing for mixed income housing.
No,
it
it
does.
says it's going to do a one-for-one replacement of affordable. It's on the commitment to preserve in the definitions.
so affordable housing equals, you do have to read multiple definitions.
Well, and mixed income is the bullet above that, and it doesn't dictate what portion of the new stock, but it does say some will be affordable. So maybe that's where you put in a percentage.
I mean, there is no definition under mixed income of how much of that affordable, how much it does have to be affordable housing.
It just says some, so we could strengthen that.
Whatever's there gets.
A sum could be 1 unit out of 3,000. That would be a sum.
Yeah.
We have 1 affordable unit, which I hope I get, but you know, other than that.
Do you have a recommendation, Eva?
I think we need to have, under mixed income, I think we really should have some kind of percentage of how much of mixed income housing has to be affordable.
I'm sorry.
Jack, no, go ahead.
No,
Well,
I'm not, but I think that becomes a very difficult thing from the market standpoint because, I mean, we put together projects that we have, like our Lincoln Center, which is an affordable housing project. And often what you'll have is you'll have a lot of section, what is it, 503 housing, whatever it's called, I can't remember, but that will be part of an existing complex. But if we, my question becomes, so to be an urban center, you're saying so much of it must be affordable housing. It says here it must accommodate some definition, but I don't know that we go down that road. It's not something we control. We can make it available because we do it through CDBG grants. We do it, and that's how we, most of the time we achieve that, is we do our allocation of our funding to entities who will take advantage of it, and we incent them to do it. But I'm just trying to understand it, because I'm not arguing or disagreeing with them. I'm trying to understand how we move to that goal and get that to be an attainable thing when the reality of it is it becomes a reality of non-attainable because nobody's going to do it.
But there has to be a way of encouraging people.
That I get. I get.
Encouraging.
Maybe it's that communities will commit to allowing, you know, part of their CDBG grant process or whatever it is, their allocations for it, to these urban centers for that purpose. I see that.
Val.
Yeah, and I don't think we're trying to identify that an urban center has to have X number of affordable housing. I think what this criteria here is saying is that if you do have affordable housing, then you get extra points. And if you don't, you don't get the points.
So if we look at the way staff recommended this be written, it says the proposed project must exhibit at least 3 of the following characteristics to receive points. That could be one of the characteristics that's used. So I actually do think the way it's written does lend itself, if we would like a recommendation on a better definition of or affordable housing, mixed income housing, and maybe I can throw it out back to staff to identify a better way to characterize that if we don't think it is characterized well enough in here. So I'm going back and forth between my marked up and my real copy. Proposed project. So proposed project is located within an urban center or rural town center where the community has committed to preserve or developed mixed income housing, and then it says C definition. So Eva, just so I understand and I give staff better direction, what type of language are you thinking needs to be better clarified in that bullet? Because to me it does say if you're going to commit...
You're looking at just mixed income. Mixed income doesn't necessarily mean that it's affordable housing. If there was a way that, or some form of language that we could come up with that would encourage affordable housing, where they get the extra points, you know, whether it's a community or whoever, to have affordable housing in the process. I mean, there's got to be better language than mixed income, because people could take mixed income any other way. It doesn't specifically say affordable.
But okay, and I'm just in my mind going, so then when it says, it defines, so mixed income housing to me equals the number of existing affordable housing units, but you're right. I mean, it doesn't then say if it's a new urban center. So
right.
Chris, do you have something to contribute to this?
Yeah, I really appreciate Eva bringing this up. I think she's got a point. I think a lot of the solution lies in the definitions, though, because in the bullet, I mean, you could avoid the bullet entirely. You could blow off the whole housing affordability question by nailing 3 other bullets. But if you want to go for that bullet, the proposed project is located within an urban center or rural town center where the community has committed to preserve or committed to develop mixed income housing, and then the definitions say
It could just say,
committed to preserve mixed income housing means you're replacing them 1-to-1 and they're affordable. Affordable is defined as rental, affordable to 0 to 60, or for sale, affordable to 0 to 80.
well, could it be solved by saying where the community has committed to preserve or develop mixed income housing,
Well,
including affordable housing?
I think the preserved mixed income housing definition works okay because it says has inventoried the number of existing affordable units and is committed to preserving or replacing them 1-for-1. Affordable is defined as those area median incomes. The problem lies in the commitment to develop mixed income housing, and I think Eva's right on point by saying, you know, the definition says the community has committed that some portion of the new stock within the urban center will be affordable. Some portion totally needs to be defined. I mean, I think we got to put a number in there. What proportion? I think 2 things have to happen. We need to define some, A, and B, we have to clarify in that 4th bullet when it says the community has committed to preserve or develop mixed income housing. That suggests, well, if you've committed to preserve mixed income housing, you have no requirement to develop mixed income housing. So there's no mixed income housing there now. We are committed to replacing that 1-for-1 that we don't have. And we're actually going to build a whole bunch of housing, and not one stick of it's going to be affordable. I think it has to be.
So what I'm suggesting is
be clear that it's, if you're preserving housing, you're preserving affordable housing. If you're building housing, you're building affordable housing. We just have to define some. What's the threshold that gets you that bullet? Because you could weasel out of it pretty easy.
Okay, so what I was suggesting is actually using the word affordable in there, and then that doesn't address your comment about how much in the sum portion of it, but if you said project is, you know, where the community has committed to preserve or develop mixed income housing, including affordable housing. If you put that word in there, we do address the affordable issue. We don't identify the sum piece of it, okay, which we can have another discussion about. But do we have consensus that if including that word does address Eva's first point? And Val has, yeah.
Yeah, I guess there is a point that Chris has made about the definition portion of it. But in the overall surface, you got 5 bullet points. And all you have to do is meet 3 of the 5. So you're not encouraging anybody to build affordable housing because they can meet their 3 without not even addressing that at all whatsoever. I would rather like to see a bonus point for somebody that builds affordable housing, because they could just blow it off and not even address it.
Yeah.
I guess I'm struggling with that a little bit, and I'm not sure why I'm struggling with that, but I'll tell you my gut says I want to think about that before I guess I go back to transportation money, the priority. I understand this portion of it is for our MVIC goals, but to me, assigning transportation dollars because of, I'm struggling with it. I'm just going to say that, you know. That to me is just not as clear a path as some of the others. So if there's a school there, should we give them a point too? I mean, if they provide daycare at the school, do they get another point? I'm not trying to be flip in my comments. I'm just trying to understand that. Eva is going to explain it to me.
You'll find I'm a bleeding heart. Basically, when it comes to transportation, the population that uses our transportation the most and needs the transportation the most are those who live in the affordable housing. So what you're doing is you're encouraging people who really do need this transportation aren't going to be able to afford to live near the transportation. And that is unfortunate, because that's basically what's happening now. We have a lot of new urban centers that are going up that nobody can afford to live in, including myself.
Kathy.
Okay, I just want to make it clear, because we're not giving out transit dollars, we're not giving out faster dollars, we're giving out dollars that for roads. So,
Or bike.
or bike or whatever, but I'm just saying that multimodal, but if it's all about going, if we're saying they, once again, have to have mass transit, what if I have affordable housing that doesn't even have a bus nearby, which I can tell you there's, and certainly doesn't have light rail nearby? That's going to be an issue for some other communities that may not be sitting at this table right now, and they still have urban centers, but I'm just a little concerned that we're tying it too closely to, once again, that thing that's not within our control. So
Rocky.
Yeah, no, really good conversation here, and I appreciate that staff may do a little bit more work and fine-tune this. I think I would maybe offer to, the importance, the strong importance of having affordable housing, in these centers is because of the fact that these are focal points for connectivity throughout the region, whether it's by vehicle, transit, or whatever. And when you consider the fact that I know national, and Jennifer, maybe your staff knows this figure for the Denver region, but typically it's about a third of the population doesn't have access to automobiles. So I think that's, and part of that, big part of that percentage are folks that just don't have the means. It is an income issue. So I think being very aggressive about ensuring that affordability and households that may not have access to a vehicle, do have decent access either within a center or close proximity to it is a critical thing we need to be addressing in this process.
I think Jennifer has got a comment.
Well, I just want to point out that not every urban center even has housing. It's just not suitable. So part of the reason that we put the urban center boxes together, the two that you just approved, is because not every urban center can meet all of those things. Some people may not need the parking issue because of just the other characteristics of the urban center, or whatever the case may be. So that's why we listed a menu and said we value urban centers, so you get points, and these other characteristics are important too in reaching the goal, but understanding again that this is I don't think anyone would deny that we need more affordable housing in the region, but not every location is necessarily suitable for it. So if your urban center is going to get even more points than if you meet a certain threshold of what's important, then you get additional points. So it certainly wouldn't be, it would follow the logic and the rationale that staff have put forward to add affordable housing here if you wanted to. But the reason we put this together the way we did was because we understand with the existing urban centers that are out there, not all of them even have housing. So getting back to that issue of, well, I can't compete, this we felt like gave, recognized that not every urban center is created the same, and gave everyone an opportunity to compete. And if you want to include affordable housing, great. If you want to have parking, that's great too. If you want to have mixed use, good for you. But we're not going to value judge those necessarily. So I just wanted to remind everyone what the rationale was, and that adding a bullet for affordable housing fits very well into that logic.
Thank you. Actually, that was very helpful to me, at least. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but Suzanne, do you have?
Well, I was just going to suggest that maybe we direct staff to go and prepare that bullet for us for consideration at our next meeting.
Is that a motion? Oh, do we need a motion?
I don't know if
to
we
do
need a
that? Or
motion.
is that, okay,
but
great,
It seems to be maybe where we're at.
great.
Well said.
Okay,
Okay.
it's all you, Doug.
Great. Well, just one other comment on that affordable housing, just so everybody knows, there is an environmental justice section too, which there are points which lays outside of MetroVision. So just so you're aware of that, up to 3 points is eligible. So it can also be captured there.
Did everybody hear that comment? No. Can you repeat that, Doug? I actually think it's a very valuable point.
Sure. Yeah. Outside of MetroVision, every project has the opportunity to get up to 3 points for environmental justice, depending, of course, on the location and the merit of that project. So.
Kath.
I don't mean to be the devil's advocate here, but depending on how we fix the definitions of mixed income or affordable, one affordable housing unit now gets you 2 bullets, one thing.
Right.
Good point.
So
yeah, take it out.
We'll massage that.
Yeah,
you need to massage the definitions, because if you read the definitions on the back, the same building now
gets double counted.
Gets double counted. Yeah.
Great
Okay.
point. Good. Good. Okay.
Anything else on this? All right.
Okay, that takes us to Appendix G, which is, just keep flipping pages there, is the sponsor-related MetroVision implementation criteria. And the first one for our discussion is local response to changing demographics. And this is, projects that illustrate support for meeting the challenges of an aging population. This is, well, the language is clarified a little bit, isn't it, Brad? We did add some clarifications of this criterion, didn't we?
Sure. I've had a few questions sort of offline about the second sentence in that box. It says, please see the Boomer Bond assessment tool and toolkit for example implementation strategies. And there was some confusion from some folks who thought that meant that a jurisdiction or sponsor actually had to formally or officially go through the Boomer Bond assessment process. That is not what is meant to connote. What really it means is we are in the process of producing, and it will be done by the time tip scoring happens, a best practices guide for communities that are thinking about creating healthy and successful communities that can support healthy and successful aging. And so this was just to give people a checklist or a set of examples that you could look at as you're thinking through the evaluation process to identify a project, program, or activity that you could point to that would make you eligible to receive this point. So again, this is not a situation where someone would have to formally go through the Boomer Bond assessment process. It's just, are you doing something on your own as well to create that age-friendly community?
Elise.
So rookie question here. Remind me what this point used to be for, because it talks about community design policies, including senior-friendly policies, but presumably not exclusively. And it seems like we're changing that to be just about aging. And I'm just wondering, what are we losing in the process? What else were we giving points for before that we no longer are?
In MetroVision 2035, there is a community design element that sort of spells out some of those particular policies. When you read the policy language, it makes it very clear. It says, with an emphasis towards creating an age-friendly environment, but it's a whole series of things. I don't have it in front of me, but things like universal design, actually housing issues, housing option, location, affordability type issues, density, a pretty generic set of design principles.
Kathy.
Is perhaps when the evaluation criteria says local response to changing demographics and then it talks only about aging, should it say local response to aging demographics? Because if you're talking about changing, some areas of our community are actually going the other way. Just so you know, we have those areas that have already aged and they're turning back into young families. So just whichever, if the goal is part of MetroVision is to be aging, then maybe that needs to say that that's what it is. If it's just changing where perhaps it's more handicapped, which is also senior friendly, does it need to say people of all ages, abilities, and incomes?
Very good. That sound right, Brad? I mean, that was the intent of this one, right?
Obviously, we talk all the time that a community that can support successful aging can support any number of people in various stages of life. So that is the emphasis, but the hope is that ultimately that impacts everyone.
Right, so instead of just changing it, that word may need to be aging. Just, yeah.
Does that address what your question was, Elise?
Well, I just wanted to point out and make sure that we were all okay with, I've dug it up. The previous goal was promoting community design features that meet the needs of people of all ages, incomes, and abilities. We are now talking about focusing that only on the aging population, which may have a whole lot of merit to it, but I just want to make sure we're cognizant of the change that we're making. So,
Phil.
With this, just trying to, in effect, get to Elise's point so that folks don't have to necessarily go through and dig it up. Is it possible to put the criteria in here, maybe make it less specific to just aging as opposed to all aging? Universal design actually makes sense for a lot of folks, not just those that happen to be at the age of frailty.
So would it demonstrate jurisdictions' plans, programs, and policies to support universal design?
I mean, it's. I think there's more to it than that. That's one element of it.
Right.
But it should be clearer if we're trying to make it at least simpler. Referring to another document doesn't necessarily make it simpler.
I'm sorry, Rocky.
Okay. Yeah, so there is some complexity to our conversation here because, you know, there's different types of demographics that are kind of colliding here when we're talking about transportation. So, you know, when I talked a few minutes ago about a third of the population, you know, that's seniors, that's people of low income, that's people who choose not to have an automobile, or the very young. And again, in our region, if it's a third, I mean, that's 800,000 people that have transportation needs that they're not able to meet by vehicles. Now, in terms of changing demographics, you know, it's kind of a different landscape. Again, seniors is a growing demographic, but so are, you know, young startups. We're seeing a growth in single-parent households and just single-person households. I mean, so collectively, you know, that's kind of a demographic change we're seeing, which I think is more in terms of, you know, what are we doing around adjusting our housing and so on to meet that change. So just offer that as information. I mean, there's some overlap, but there is some distinction, I think, when we're talking about transportation and those that are more transportation dependent.
Don.
Thank you. I would like to just propose a real quick modification. If we go back to local response to changing demographics, and I agree, we all have different demographics. We have a huge aging population in Jefferson County. We also have the second largest veteran population. And then just in the definition, I would just say demonstrate jurisdictions' plans, programs, and policies to support healthy and successful living. That takes care of developmentally disabled, veterans, aging. We're talking about the different demographics, Rocky, that you mentioned. It provides an opportunity for each of us. You know, our demographics are going to be different from each other and different within our communities. And how do we do that? And it's a wide variety. It gives a. I know it's very bland. I know it's very 30,000 foot, but then it provides us that say, hey, there's a plan in place for my specific community. I'll show you where it is and get points for it.
Phil, did you have a comment? I saw it go up and then down. Okay, Suzanne.
Well, just responding to both Rocky and Don's comments, I do think we want to make sure we're responding to different changes. I think, so I like where you're headed with the idea. I think, though, we should be a little more specific. Otherwise, this could mean anything, right? So we want to make sure that there's a threshold, that you're responding to specific trends in your community. So I don't know if we need to list a few of the populations we're most concerned about, or the trends that are popping up, but definitely something to make sure that that communities are being responsive to trends. So I don't know, I'm sure you guys can think of ways to say that, but get at that there's more than one trend happening, but not make it so vague that anybody can do anything and we qualify.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, get clarification from the discussion. While it may not have been said well, I think that the intent when the original language was adopted was to recognize that by the time we got to 2035, a quarter of the region's population would be over 60, and they have special needs. And as Brad said, when we at DRCOG talk about the quote-unquote changing demographics, we truly are speaking about the aging population. Kathy mentioned too, serving people of all ages, incomes, and abilities. So I guess my question is, do we want to have something in there specifically about aging, because again, a quarter of our population will be over 60 by the time we reach the horizon year? Or do we want to make it more generic, or do we want to try to do both? Because I'm not sure. I think that staff is well versed enough on all of this, but we definitely had some pretty specific things in mind when we were thinking about the aging population. Again, we think that when you create communities that support people with seniors, you are providing alternative transportation, you're a more walkable community, you're mixed use so that folks don't have to walk quite so far, you have wide sidewalks, good lighting, great wayfinding. All of those are helpful to seniors as well as disabled, a young mother or father pushing a stroller, etc. So I'm not really clear what you'd like to see if we go back and rework this. So I need more direction.
Don. All right, you don't have a comment. I actually do have a comment. I do think I agree with everything Jennifer just said, and I think we're trying to be politically correct by not just calling out aging, but if we do, what we accomplish when we do plan and implement policies for the aging population is actually achieve the goals of all abilities and incomes, and it's all encompassing. So is it that bad to just call it aging? I mean, our demographics are such that that is a huge issue for all of our communities. May not be at the same level for each of our communities, but everyone in all of our communities hopefully is aging. So if we implement policies, procedures to facilitate that happening the most effectively, efficiently as possible, I completely agree with Elise's first comment, but I guess what I'm coming to is we're not losing anything. I guess that's where I'm sitting here. We're not losing anything by doing this, and that was the concern. So what is the sense of the group, Chris?
I agree with you 90%.
Woohoo! It's an A!
The only thing that I got it all, just use aging. Just everything you do associated with that would work for everything else except for kids, safe routes to schools. So that's a set of policies. We have parts of our city that are, people are, breeding like rabbits, and there's kids all over the place, and we got to figure out how to get them to school without getting flattened or driving. And so the Safe Routes to School program is really important. That would have nothing, figuring out how to get old people to a school. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, Chris, but look at the next one, implement alternative travel mode plans. I mean, in my mind, the Safe Routes to School is kind of a part of a travel mode plan that is going to be addressed, right? So I don't see where safe routes to school is even.
I'm not saying I'm not saying cite safe routes to school.
I understand.
I'm saying the transportation problems of school-age kids are peculiar, and it is a particular demographic. I think you capture all the other issues with aging except for school-age kids who are too young to drive. But hell, that was 90% agreement.
All right, so all right, he's 90% there. What's everyone else saying? Suzanne.
I was convinced by what Jennifer said, and I would be fine if we went with aging and capture it that way and kind of go with staff's recommendation.
All right, so is there consensus? Can I see a bunch of heads nodding to me that we change that? Okay, great. I think we're set there. And maybe we can think about how we can incorporate Chris's concern as we move forward through these others. Or DPS just needs to get some more buses, I'm just saying. Okay.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, the next one is implement alternative travel mode plans. This just shows a demonstrated commitment to alternative modes from the jurisdictions, from the entities applying. You know, and we did change this quite drastically, quite honest with you. You know, in the past it had this whole thing with regards to $3 per resident per year, and I think that was problematic for some entities to be able to get that information. So we simplified it a lot. So basically, if you can demonstrate that you know, these types of improvements have been done within your community, then you get X number of points.
Todd.
So just for clarity, is part of the scoring providing your jurisdiction's adopted plan?
Can you repeat that?
Just for clarity, is providing the scoring instructions provide jurisdictions adopted plans for either bicycle, pedestrian transportation, demand, TDM, or transit forms of travel. So in order to get those points, are they required to submit that, is what I'm asking. It just seems odd to me that the evaluation criteria is implement alternative travel mode plans, but first on the list is to provide that and not to demonstrate the implementation.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, I mean that is the intent, that they would supply with their application the adopted plan, but they would also show that there's implementation of that plan with the projects in their current CIP or what have you. Yeah.
Suzanne.
So just to clarify, you just have to have a plan. It doesn't say how old it is, but then it's coupled with a show that your current capital improvement program has a current project. Is that the way you get at, you have to done something in the last 20 years kind of thing?
Well, no, it does say within your current, doesn't it?
Right, as of July 31st,
yes,
2014.
Yeah.
Still.
Demonstrate an example project in the jurisdiction's currently adopted capital improvement plan or operating budget. Yeah. Elise.
Well, I am, again, I appreciate simplification. It feels like we're lowering the bar considerably, and I want to make sure, I mean, wasn't the point of this to show that people are actively doing this in their communities, prove it to us? And I'm just wondering if this goes far enough to make that as meaningful as it should be or has been in the past. I'm willing to be convinced otherwise, but it does feel like we've lowered the bar.
I guess when I read this, I thought about a project we're looking at in Lone Tree. So let me just give you, we're looking at putting in a shuttle service that's going to take people from the light rail station along an employment corridor and drop them off at various places along the station. And to me, that, you know, it's getting people out of their cars, solving that last half mile, and that is something that would qualify here. And, you know, having to prove that it's $3 per resident per year average, you know, to me that seems pointless versus just, hey, this is a project that's, go ahead.
I think that's a really good example of a good project that would demonstrate your commitment. But if I just put in, you know, benches at the bus stop, that too is a project, and maybe I spent $1,000 on it, that doesn't demonstrate the same level of commitment to alternative transportation that Lone Tree is showing with their project. So I'm just wondering, is there any way to, not all project examples are created equally, so is there some threshold in terms of, we're trying to show some community commitment, and this doesn't differentiate to somebody that's doing something pretty small versus somebody that's really integrated it. So I'm just wondering if there's a way we can do a little bit more without the complication of $3 per resident per year average.
Jack, we haven't heard from you in a while.
No, but the one thing about this one we have to keep in mind, there are federal requirements on some projects that you have to spend X amount of money on multimodal, period. So the fact of the matter is there are commitments in these projects that go far beyond what that statement right there says. So you're going to have to do it. There's even requirements on how you spend dollars on widening sidewalks in order to accommodate pedestrian and bicycle. The park benches is actually part of that whole program in order to accommodate people's ability to have pedestrian use as well as to get shuttle services and et cetera. So those costs and those programs are actually defined in other ways in the way that you have to use and design your projects. And that's been my whole argument before, is that we keep coming back and double whacking ourselves over and over when a lot of these projects are requirements and mandates of the design of the project in the first place. Environmental justice is a demand requirement on many projects. So it's in there, and we're already having to spend the money on it. It's just a matter of having to show that you're doing it. Accounting for it by saying we're doing $3, I think that's crazy. I mean, it's just like getting down. I just understand that, because now we're just that is just an accounting process. It's creative writing, and so I think we're okay with the definition. I think I like where we're going with it. You've got to demonstrate that you're doing it, and the key is demonstrate implementation, showing. The biggest key here, I think it's important what staff did, is that it's in your budget. Show me that it's in your budget and you're doing it. And that is the key. If I've allocated dollars to it, then I'm committed. I mean, I'm on my way. So I don't know how much farther we could go with it, in my opinion.
Are there any other thoughts? Suzanne? Goodbye.
Well, I am hearing what's being said, which is that $3 per resident was too arduous and too impossible to figure out. Is there some middle, is there another metric besides, you're getting close, I think, with showing that you're currently doing something. Is there any way to get at Elise's question of putting a little more skin in the game than just a project?
Right. But I don't see how a park bench qualifies. I mean, if you said I'm putting in park benches, that is not a
I think it was bus benches.
Oh, sorry. Okay, even if you're putting a bus bench in, though, frankly, Elise, I don't see where that's an adopted plan for bicycle, pedestrian, or TDM, transit form of travel. I don't see how that's...
You could have a really, really old
Well, frankly, if DRCOG staff allowed you to get those points, I would have an issue with DRCOG staff or your staff for writing it up that way to think they could qualify for points. But I guess,
Well, it was just a question towards staff.
Yeah, I'm
There's
sorry. I'm sorry. It's just staff.
If you had any other ideas about
Well, honestly, the best of my recollection, the $3, it was just, pulled it out of the air. Doug and I were just chatting just a little bit, maybe it's if you really want to attach some sort of number to this, maybe it's a percentage of the CIP, or depending on how your CIP is put together, I don't know how easy or difficult it is to pull out just transportation components, and I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just kind of struggling as to if we did something like that, what would the percentage be? Because it truly is kind of just pulling a number out of the air.
Todd.
I agree. I think to try to figure out a percentage number, I mean, some people have a budget to spend on this kind of thing and some people don't, and I'm okay with the way it's with it reads, if you're demonstrating implementation and you've devoted it to your CIP, no matter how big or small that is, and maybe the interpretation of those projects would be up to the staff at DRCOG.
Okay, is there any consensus from the group as far as moving forward with the language as proposed by staff?
Well,
Recognizing, Elise, go ahead.
I'm willing to back off it. If other people think this is fine and this is adequate, I'm willing to be convinced. I was looking for something. I get we're ready to move away from the $3. I get that, but maybe we just try it out and see if it's robust enough.
Or whether, it's being abused or Jack, do you want to say something?
Well, yeah, I just want to say, I really do believe when you've demonstrated in your budget, it's there. And I also believe when you look at the fact that there's other funding criteria requirements that when you're using state and federal dollars that you have to meet certain types of multimodal requirements. I think it was 10% of the budget of a project has to be multimodal, Steve. Is that what it is? Is it federal? I can't remember what it is, but I know I looked at it only because I'm going to go back to it. I've looked at the lane balancing project on I-25. We were required to spend $1 million on that exact topic. We were required to. So we had to figure out how we were going to do that. And we did in order to get approval to have the project even done. So we have other ways that this is demonstrated. What really makes me feel good about it, leaving it like it is capital improvement program and operating budgets are equivalent. I mean, it's locked in our CIP plan. So that means, guess what? We're going to have to go down that road. And it's going to be called out by staff that your project's meeting this, So.
Okay, it sounds like there is consensus to move ahead with the staff language as proposed, and it's probably something we are going to keep an eye on to make sure it isn't being abused, for lack of a better word. Am I getting head nods around the table for that? Yeah, okay, thanks.
Great, thank you very much. The next one's the Mile High Compact, and we already discussed that last month. That takes us to the PM10 criterion. Let me just scroll down here. And well, these are voluntary measures, of course, and they are referenced in the CIP and helps demonstrate air quality conformity. There's two boxes, and it's either or. One is based on communities that were in the PM10 domain. They were asked to submit commitments and awarded X number of points based on what that commitment would be. And then criterion 2 were ones that lay outside of that domain. and like number of points as well.
Jack.
Yeah. This is one actually I don't like, but I'm going to tell you right now. I think we have to act. I'm 100% like a while ago. At least I'm backing off of this one. This is a RAC issue,
yes,
and this is their equivalent to meet federal sustainable issues. And we have an entire RAC board that puts these together. And this is speaking to one of their members. This is their thing. I mean, literally and truly, and they ask us to make it part of this whole process. So I just want to make sure that the RAC, that we talk with them and make sure if they're comfortable with the way it is, to be quite honest with you, I've backed off my thinking on it. Like I said before, I don't care for it. But the fact is, it's their domain, and this is a real sticky, wicked world over here. I'm willing to live with it, but I think we need to really just communicate this with the RAC and see what they would prefer us to do, in my opinion.
We have talked to RAC, and they're enthusiastic about the way the language is written.
To leave it as it is?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Are there any other comments? Phil.
I'll get back a little bit to what Elise was mentioning earlier. This is looking for a commitment to deliver something in the future, and how are we going to measure whether that happens or not, and whether any estimate of what it's going to achieve is actually reasonable or not. And this gets back to why not go to direct measurement, but that's the underlying point. Doug.
I mean, that's a great question. It's difficult. I mean, the hope is that, at the monitors that, that this does have some effect. But of course, something this voluntary is probably not going to have a tremendous effect. But it's important just the same.
Jack.
That was the exact question that I had when was that, wait a minute, what are we going down this road with? And frankly, there's this, they have to be able to demonstrate to the federal government that there is a progressive plan straightforward. Because here's the question. If you meet 55% attainment, the next year you've got 45% left. Then you have to meet 55% of that. Okay, then you've got 21% left. Then you have to meet 55% of that to get max points. Okay, and that became my argument. And when I was talking to them, or my discussion point was that at one point in time, if I'm at attainment, because in reality, if I did 30, 30, 30, 30, at some point in time, the difference between doing the 55 and that is going to be minuscule. So it's going to have to be addressed at some point, but I don't know how we go about it because they do the measurement. They're the ones that do the measurement, and I just don't know. It was one of those, I don't know.
So it sounds like there is consensus to go ahead and leave it with the language the way it has been proposed. Is there anybody that's, I know consensus, I know we're not in uniform agreement on that, but is there another proposal to do something different? I understand there's dissatisfaction, but if you don't have a proposal for something else. So the points, which
So I think the devil will be in the details when we decide what percentage of points each of these things also get. So, you know, just realizing the way it's, if we're going to, if all of these things are going to end up being the same sort of percentage of the total, that's one thing. If we're looking at it's going to be weighted differently, so we haven't gotten to that discussion yet. So that may change what people think. If all of a sudden this was an enormous amount of points, you know, but if it's relative to what it's been.
Jennifer.
I think from the RAC's point of view and the Air Quality Control Division's point of view, we're in conformity for PM10. This isn't a conformity issue right now, but for them to show the federal government that they're continuing to keep things in place to make sure that we don't come out of conformity, it's more important to have something in here. I don't think the points so much is their issue, although they have said that, you know, they like the language, but I think that the most important thing to those two groups is that there's recognition in the tip scoring that we've had PM10 problems in the past. We don't want PM10 problems in the future, and so we've got something in place to incentivize people to do things that will keep PM10, keep us from going out of conformity.
Phil.
Yes, I'll offer two alternatives. One is skip criterion 1 and just move to criterion 2 because it's objective and it's straightforward, looks at the past component. Second, if folks are very interested in looking at commitment going forward, that commitment determination is done by some professional group before it gets to the scoring that's broader than the staff.
Please.
Yeah.
The Regional Air Quality Council works with your staff every single year. And I want to point out, this is a model around the country, this program that we've had since 1989, or that not we, the RAC has had. They've worked with your public works staff since 1989 on this, and it really is a model, and the techniques that you've used to sweep up the sand after it's placed down after snowstorms, to use less amounts of sand, to use more de-icer and things like that, has been one of the key reasons that we have stayed in conformity for PM10. The Regional Air Quality Council every year contacts your staff to see how you're doing on these different measures here. So I just wanted to make sure that that was known too. And they put together this table every single year that says how each community is doing towards that, and then that comes into the score.
So, Steve, you're speaking to that criterion 2 is very objective. But with regard criterion 1, other than folks are making a promise, how is that validated?
It is monitored every year by the...
No, it's monitored going back, but criterion 1 looks for a commitment going forward to something that hasn't yet happened.
I'm not it's whether your community is under the program or not. So if you've not been part of the program, but you're doing it voluntarily, criterion 2 gives you points. Am I perhaps summarizing that? So criterion 1 is those communities that were asked to participate in the program get scored there. If you were not asked to be part of the program and you're voluntarily doing something, it's in number 2. Is that that's the way I understood it? Okay.
I actually, let me come back and make a clarification, because my first approach was to use criterion 2 but skip the parenthetic comment. What is your current practice? What have you been achieving?
It's all based on the same.
So I recognize, Phil, this is not what you would like, but I'm going to, in the interest of moving this forward and giving staff some closure and direction, is there consensus from the rest of the group that this language is acceptable? To keep it as is? And I'm getting some head nods. Yes? Okay. And recognizing that just like this with everything else, we're not all getting what we want all the time. But this has been a practice that's been in place, so we're going to... All right. Let me invite you into the lobby when the meeting is closed. All those who want to discuss what didn't happen the way they wanted it to happen, I'm more than willing to stand there and talk to you. But in the interest of getting the meeting going, are we okay?
Okay. Well, that takes us through all the individual criterion for MetroVision. We do have 2 other questions that we'd like to ask you, more general questions about MetroVision. One, Madam Chairman, you tell me if we're ready for this, but roughly, 26 points right now in the current criteria, TIP criteria, is dedicated to MetroVision. The question is if you guys feel comfortable that that is the appropriate number of points for MetroVision going forth, so that we have some understanding about where you are.
And in 26 out of a total 100 points, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So what are people's thoughts? Roughly a quarter of the points, MetroVision goals. It's been the way it's been done in the past. So what we're committing then to you guys is those 26 points are going to be dispersed about amongst the boxes that we talked about today. And the last 2 meetings. Elise.
Well, I would speak for 26 points. I think it's important that this is linking our regional values and vision to transportation funding in a really direct way. So it makes sense that there is a significant portion, not all of them, of course, but a significant portion of points that come from meeting those. So
my only comment would be that it doesn't have to be exactly 26. It could be 23. It could be right in that range of a quarter of the points is the consensus of the group that they're comfortable with that. If speak now or forever hold your peace. Yes, Jack.
I'm fine with the range now, because my biggest complaint about 26 before was the way the points were calculated, and we have addressed that. So I'm comfortable with whatever percentage we apply.
Okay, I'm not hearing any other comments, so yes.
Great, thank you very much. And the next question, I probably should ask this one first, if there's other types of criteria within MetroVision itself that you would like to see evaluated and be grouped in with the other individual ones.
That's a little open-ended. I think. Yeah. I think we might. I think we can't answer that yet. Jack can answer it.
I'm happy we just simplified the darn thing. Let's don't complicate it back again. Get back to Lisa's question.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Well, we're off MetroVision here right now, at least for a while. What we did want to talk to you about was minimum funding request levels for projects. There's been some discussions throughout the last few months about the ability for smaller projects to be able to compete. And what staff's recommending is that that we establish a new minimum, and that would be $100,000 minimum request for federal share, and that would give smaller projects a better opportunity to compete. But in order to minimize that administrative burden that CDOT would have, because regardless of the size of the project, the administration of that project is virtually the same. That we're suggesting that we cap the number of projects that are between 100,000 and 300,000 to 10 per TIF cycle. We think that's appropriate based on just history. We think that that's an appropriate number. Right now, the minimum request level is based on this information that's down here lower on the page. And you can see it was kind of a potpourri of everything here. It's studies at 75 and other non-constructions 200. So we're suggesting that we just use 100,000 as a minimum, and it will give smaller projects a better opportunity. And we think it's certainly much simpler than what it was in the past. I would entertain any questions.
Phil, do you have a comment on this, or is it just up? Oh.
In working with this, it's actually more of a question, which is, if my recollection in our discussion, just so it's my understanding, is this is the large pool, and it might be good to include some of this in a discussion as to what are other pools, because we've talked about possibly lumping smaller projects in at county levels and letting that competition exist at the county levels, or something that would be separate. So
yes.
I probably would like to see some sort of elevation before we deal with limits within what we're looking at as the large project pool.
Very good. Yeah, as far as pool discussion and project type discussion, we're going to have a larger discussion about that next meeting. So that's more FYI than anything.
Can I make a suggestion then to lump this with that discussion?
He wants to lump this with that discussion. Jennifer?
I guess I need a little bit more understanding, Phil, of where you're coming from, because this isn't regardless of the pools and what those are called and what kinds of projects can compete in each pool. We're suggesting that that projects of $100,000 can compete for those dollars. We hear from a lot of our smaller jurisdictions and even some of our larger jurisdictions, but that have small projects, they can't get into the competition because we have these minimums as shown up there on the screen and in your program. So we are trying to address this request from smaller communities and these folks that have smaller projects to lower this minimum, allow them in the competition regardless of the pool. It doesn't matter what pool you end up in. If you have a project of $100,000, a minimum of $100,000, you can compete. So I'm not clear what you want us to look at, Phil. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, because there's been a number of discussions. One is possibly working with CDOT to have some set of dollars that would not have to fit with some of the federal criteria. How much do we think might exist in that? Because we might want to have an even smaller limit for some levels of projects, and so if we're saying 100,000 for all projects, I'm not comfortable at this stage without really having an understanding of what is out there, because we may want to have a smaller limit for non-federal dollar projects if we're going to have some of those dollars available.
Well, I hear you, and if CDOT were had any inkling as to when they would have that information for us, I think I'd be supportive of that. But we don't know right now if CDOT is going to come to the table. For those of you who may not recall or may not have been part of those conversations, we have opened the door and asked CDOT to walk through it, although they have not yet, but to consider trading some of the MPO's federal dollars for some state dollars to eliminate or at least reduce match for particularly small communities small budget communities who really struggle to come up with match. We've approached CDOT on a couple of occasions. They have not come back and said, yeah, we're open to that yet. So I don't know when or if that will transpire, but it's certainly something we're going to continue working on.
Can you give us some sense of how many projects in the past have been funded at this minimum funding level? You know, what was it? 10? Was it less than 10?
It was less than 10. I think it was 2 in the current tip, maybe. Yeah. So we felt like 10 is manageable for would be manageable for CDOT, and it's based on, you know, again, what we're hearing, and this is mostly in the one-on-one meetings that I have with jurisdictions, conversations that TPO's transportation planning staff have had with member jurisdictions as well. We think 10 is a reasonable number. We don't think that we're necessarily going to be cutting folks out. It could be, but the bottom line is CDOT's not going to like this anyway, because it does create administrative burden, and that's why there was that $300,000 minimum on most construction projects. But that's CDOT's problem, honestly. I mean, we could have, you know, $30,000 or $40,000 projects, but the burden, the administrative burden, not just on CDOT, but the administrative burden on a jurisdiction to handle a contract that small. I don't know about in your jurisdictions, but here at DRCOG, we talk all the time about the value of going after a $10,000 grant. Some things may warrant that. We may get enough cost benefit to do something like that, but we think long and hard about the cost of administering a grant and maybe contractors and all kinds of other things that go along with that. So it's an administrative burden not only for CDOT but also the jurisdiction, and that's one of the reasons too. I think we put in here in the write-up that we would work with our member jurisdictions to make sure that they understood the burden attached to accepting federal dollars, because those of you who get them on a regular basis know what that's like. And once you federalize a project, oh my gosh.
It costs more. Elise.
I just wanted to speak in support of the staff proposal. I think it's reasonable. I think it's responsive to small communities. 10 seems a manageable number. Sounds like it's not something we're bumping up against. And to Phil's point, we can leave open the opportunity to re-examine this issue if and when CDOT comes forward with some money that we can do that with, and maybe make sense to look at it again at that point. But for now, I think this works.
Jack.
I can live with staff recommendation. I think that's fine, but we do have to understand that there is going to be, in my opinion, CDOT will attach project manager administrative costs to those dollars when they pass it down. And I can tell you that right now the going rate is about 23%. And there's a lot of staff time that's just eaten up in providing the necessary information for them in that administrative. You can easily, and so I'm just going to give you one project I'm working right now that's many more dollars than that. And I will tell you that about, in the end, the total estimate management operational cost establishment is about 40% of the total project. So small counties have got, small communities have got to understand what this is going to mean to them if we're going to go down this road. I also believe that it's going to look at CDOT's going to say, fine, but it's going to be 50%, and we're on our way. But we just got to be cognizant of that, and I can support it because at least it's more than nothing. But
I also would just like to make a comment that, because we're not necessarily saying we're going to fund 10 per tip cycle. We're saying that's the most we would fund, right? Is that clear? Okay, that's my only comment. So it's, I think Elise did say, you know, recommend staff position recommendation here. So is there consensus by head nods that that is, and recognizing not everyone is in agreement, but the majority of us are, okay, sounds good.
Great. That takes us to next steps. At the next meeting, we'll bring back to you the clarity you desire for the strategic corridors. We'll have a look at the map on that, the UGB discussion, and the affordable housing. There might have been one or two others. No, we're keeping notes, so we'll be sure to bring that all back to you. Also at the next meeting, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, we will begin our discussion about the various project types that we have and pools. There's been quite a bit of discussion on pools and the openness of maybe adding additional pools or maybe even removing some. So we'll have that discussion. Last but certainly not least, at the next meeting, we should also have some knowledge from CDOT on how much money, federal money, DRCOG will have available for each of the federal categories. So we'll be sure to roll that out to you guys, and that'll really help us with deciding where we want to target our money and what have you. That's it.
Okay, I would just like to thank you guys very much for the time and energy you have put into this. I know it's been rough and you had an extra meeting, and I think it has been a valuable use of our time. I'd also like to point out that all of the things that we have agreed on up to this point will be presented at the board meeting in 2 weeks to the full board with our recommendation. Yes, Jack.
I just want to point out the reason for the quiet lull was because I went outside for a moment. My lips were frozen together. Guys, it is cold out there.
There was, yeah. And Don, did you have a comment? I saw a hand over here.
I did. I just wanted to make you aware that March 5th, I know that many of the counties will be gone for the next meeting. Members, we have a National Association of County Officials, and I know I will not be here. And I'm assuming...
Sweet.
Is NLC
we'll
the
get
same
what we
week,
want.
Val? Yeah.
5th.
So if your alternates need to attend the meeting, the March 5th, for... No, the board... Oh.
And vote in your absence. Your board alternate can attend and vote.
For MVIC?
On MVIC.
Committee description does allow for alternates to attend in your absence and vote in your absence.
Well, okay, we can't, we'll
We need to cancel a meeting.
Yeah.
If that's the case, my alternate will be with us. What's that?
You're,
My alternate.
well, I was going to say, potentially. Okay. Well, Don, thank you for pointing that out. Obviously, we need to think about it, and the next week isn't going to work either. Jennifer, do you have a comment?
I was just going to say,
Do we-
we are on a tight deadline to put the tip together, so do we meet without those of you who can't attend? Do we reschedule?
Can we get a
What
sense?
do you want to do?
Can I get a sense of how many people are not available? All the county commissioners will not be here on the 5th. Is that a correct statement?
I will freak you out because I'm going to be here.
Woo, woo.
But
Douglas
only
County
one.
in the house.
But
Okay. So we will have, staff will send us information about the alternate policy. Elise, you will be here. Jack will be here. Eva, you will not be here. And Don, you will not be here. Is that, and on the 5th, Val, or the next week?
I'll be here on the 5th.
Okay.
Caucus is Tuesday, so
Okay.
they're going to be coming back. Commissioners will be back.
Okay. All right. So I apologize to those members that are not going to be able to be here, but it sounds like we will still be able to have a quorum at the meeting. Okay? All right. And we will clarify the alternate issue by email. Okay?
Does anyone else need a parking validation?